Hello, pond peepers, and welcome to another day at Live at the Waterhole. My name is Taylor McCurdy, and I will be your host for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes exactly. I hope you're excited because it's been quite a wet and rainy day in the Lowveld. I think it's been raining across the province of Limpopo, or at least the northeastern parts, and I think the same thing goes for Mpumalanga, the northwestern parts of the province. And we're just going to, I suppose, take what we get today, and hopefully that's going to be in the form of lots and lots of animals. But this is a live and interactive safari show, so this is your first time watching. How wonderful. What a treat on this Wednesday. Is it Wednesday or is it Tuesday? Wednesday today. I always forget the days of the week. And you can do so by heading over to the WildEarth website. You can use a question box there, or if you're using X/Twitter, just remember to hashtag WildEarth. Otherwise, you won't see your questions. And if you are watching on YouTube right now, you're welcome to use the chat, but that will only be for the next hour and a half. And then you're going to have to switch over to one of the other platforms. So very exciting stuff. And as I usually do, I just give you all a minute or two to jump on board and say hello. And I wonder who's watching today. So right now we are in Madikwe Game Reserve, which is in the northwest of South Africa. So right up in the northern parts of the country. It's a beautiful big game reserve, and this waterhole is known as Jamala. We spend a lot of time here. There's always wonderful animals frolicking about. Oh, there we go. We've got Catherine and we've got Marissa who are on and watching today. Welcome, welcome. Looking forward to hearing questions from the two of you and anybody else that I haven't said hello to yet. What are we going to talk about today? I know there's going to be some questions about my caterpillars and all sorts of things. But Sarah from the UK, hello. You've said that you're hoping for baby elephants. Oh, fingers crossed. As you know, when it does rain quite a bit and we have these sort of cooler days, there's not normally a lot of action around the waterhole. It's not to say that there can't be, it's just what we've really noticed here. So let's see, maybe we'll just get a couple of these bulls popping on past. Kelvin, you said good morning from the freezing UK. Hello, Kelvin. And Python, you're also here today, also from the UK. Wonderful. Very nice to have you all here today. I'm just quickly looking. Is that a knobbill duck that we can see just up and to the left of the elephant in the water? It doesn't look like an Egyptian goose from its coloration. Maybe it's going to be a new bird for me at this pan. Oh, there's my notebook. Speaking of, let me grab it quick. It is indeed a knobbill duck. It's a female. That's awesome. I can't see knobbill duck on any of the lists that I have for Jamala. Wonderful. That's really nice to see. It's a pity the male isn't around. They're quite dramatic, but just doing what everyone else is doing, I suppose, having brunch. Okay, Sue296, you've also just hopped on and you've said that you're hoping to see wildebeest today. Well, this is the Waterhole where we typically see a lot of wildebeest. Otherwise, after 1 p.m. South African time, we'll have access to some of the AfriCam cameras and then we'll go and check out Tau Lodge. And that's another good place. Otherwise, King's Camp is always a chance. Djuma, of course, so pretty good chance of seeing wildebeest around there. So Tadiwa is directing today, and I know that she'll keep an eye out on all the different cameras. And Sue, if we see a wildebeest, best you believe we're going to be heading there. Sorry, everybody. I was just sorting out some tech issues on my side, but I'm back. I'm back now. So this bill is going to hopefully keep us entertained because it seems to be quite quiet everywhere else. Just the odd bird flying around, some swallows swooping down to drink water, and then of course the knob-billed duck swimming around in the background. But it doesn't seem to be like too much else. I'm not sure if Madikwe had rain today or last night, but right on time the zebras are making their way in again. And hopefully with the zebras coming down, maybe the herds of wildebeest will too.
This January, WildEarth is commemorating Bird Day by showing off our feathers. Watch Safari Live and join our naturalists for a weekend of birding. Catch up with the flock as we try to spot the birds migrating back to Europe at the end of summer. Enjoy the wilderness through a new eye with our Bird Bowl. WildEarth, connecting with nature.
And it's nice to see the zebras coming down to have a drink. Not staying for very long though. And no other herds gathering like we typically see. See one group come down, take their time, and then the rest normally join. It's funny how animals will take advantage of a situation. They might also be a smaller group lingering a short distance away from the water, and then as soon as they see other animals moving down in the same place, they'll quite often follow. And we see that all the time at Jamala. And it's normally the zebras that are leading it, and then the wildebeest come on in, and then some impala pop out of nowhere. And it's just hugely beneficial for them to have more than one animal around the waterhole, because then you're not going to be singled out. Oh my goodness. Gertie, you've asked if I've ever seen a hyena giving birth before. Never. Never in my entire life. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be able to witness something like that. Sure, that's really at the right place at the right time. And it can be done in quite a concealed area too. Obviously, female hyenas, when they usually use these den sites, right? And for the most part, in the low fell part of South Africa, they use termite mounds that have been dug out by aardvark, porcupines, warthogs. So like sort of these burrows, which they'll then widen and sort of just modify to suit their needs. But they don't go all the way in. They can't fit in. But what they will do though is they might reverse in and just put half of their body inside the burrow and give birth like that. But it's quite a vulnerable process. So I don't know if I would see that. And honestly, I think if I came across something like that, I don't know if I would linger around a burrow. I would probably move away because it's just that difficult. I mean, it's really tough, right, for any animal to give birth. They are incredibly vulnerable, as I just mentioned, but it's even more tricky with hyenas. So I'd probably leave if I figured out that that's what was going on, just to give that animal some privacy and probably close off the area and not allow anyone else to go in either. But that's also, again, whether or not I'll come across that, I think I've got a better chance of winning the lotto uh, than seeing something like that. But wouldn't that be amazing, Gertie? Truly spectacular. That's where cameras come in handy. Imagine having cameras around hyena dens, that type of thing, and then being fortunate enough to witness something like that. But then again, they're not typically giving birth in a communal den. um, what they can do is move off to a more secluded space for the first little bit, first couple of weeks, and then move them back to a communal den. It also depends on their status within the hierarchy. Hierarchy within the clan. So it's quite a complicated procedure. And it's nice to see these two elephant bulls just interacting peacefully with one another, sticking his one bull on the left, sticking his trunk into the other bull's mouth, like I suppose the equivalent of a handshake. Hello, yes, I mean no harm. I will wait my turn to drink. And then, Calvin, you've said that you didn't know that elephants have two kneecaps, which are just in their back of their legs. That's really awesome that you've found that out. Yeah, so the front legs, I suppose, again, this is not super accurate though, but we can describe that first joint that they have more as like the wrists, the equivalent of like what our wrists are like. They obviously bend the other way, whereas the back legs have got little kneecaps, which is, well, not little, I was a start off little, which is really interesting because it's not always the case with many animals. Okay, he's just twisting his trunk. It's so funny how they do that. What's wrong? What's bothering you? Doesn't seem to be satisfied with the quality of the water today. Fiddling about. Maybe they have switched the water pump off at Jamala where he was drinking before. Okay, he's had one taste of that and gone, ugh, absolutely not. Who do I see about? Where's the chef? Maybe he's going to walk and try and find water that's a bit better. Looks like there is a lot of algae, though, that is forming in this waterhole now. It's really peaceful today with all the birds chirping. Don't have the speckled pigeon making a noise, which is quite nice for a change, although I'm sure it will start chatting a little bit later. Catherine, you've asked if the algae affects the animals that are drinking this water. For the most part, no. It's okay. It's fine. It's manageable. You can imagine if you have huge algal blooms, though, that could cause some side effects. Maybe something like upset stomachs, things like that. I'm not 100% sure. However, there's something called cyanobacteria that we often refer to as blue-green algae, but it's not an algae at all. It's a bacteria, and it's one of the oldest living organisms on this planet. And in high quantities, well, in an area where there's high quantities of cyanobacteria in the water, that can cause death in lots of different animals. So elephants, especially during dry seasons and droughts, can die from it. There's the famous example in Botswana that happened a couple of years ago. I forget how many elephants died, but there were so many of them. We see big cats dying from it too. So yeah, so it can be a bit of a problem. That normally only comes about when there's no new water being added to water holes. So, for example, if a dam just becomes stagnant and there's no rain or anything along those lines, or say there isn't being water pumped into that particular space, then that's got a higher risk of sort of becoming quite a toxic water hole. But at this time of the year, it's unlikely because it is the rainy season. So I think this bull is just being a little bit fussy, and now he's worked out, okay, well, this is the water that he's got to drink today. And they become spoiled, though. You can imagine if you're drinking fresh water, and the fresh water that I'm talking about is water that's coming straight from a pump. Uh, so basically, like the groundwater. There's a borehole that would have been dug, and then the pipes are sucking up water from an underground well, if you will. and that's delicious and tasty, and it's so cool as well. It's nice and cold. And now he's going, well, I'm not getting any of that today. That's rather annoying. Where's my water? Fine, I'll just drink this stuff then. But you could see he's throwing a tantrum about it. He plucked up some water, he spat it out, and then he walked and he was fiddling on the surface of the water with his trunk, trying to just sort of stir the silt. Maybe there is some algae forming. It looks like there's patches of algae here and there. Some of it is also cloud shadows that you can see reflecting off the surface of the water. But from how we've seen this waterhole completely change from the winter, which was just a couple of months ago.
A lot goes on behind the scenes of a safari. Sign up to be an explorer and get exclusive access to Behind the Safari.
Sit back, relax, and take a deep breath.
Learn more about the WildEarth team.
I would not normally keep it on the dashboard, but I'm going to show it to you there.
Come along for the surprises and chaos. Download the WildEarth app today. WildEarth, connecting with nature.
And so the bulls are moving off, going off to do a day of feeding. And you can see it's really overcast and plenty of clouds. I don't know if they're going to clear up today. I have yet to see a glimpse of the blue sky. Oh, there we go. There's a couple of patches here and there. And I actually have no idea what the weather is going to be like at Madikwe. So I'm not sure if it's going to carry, if it has rained, if it's going to carry on raining, how hot it's going to get. I should probably just Google it, right? Let me have a look for it quick. Also, the voices you can hear are just people from the lodge. I'm sure they'll be setting up for lunch sometime soon, or maybe there's guests sitting out on the deck and just enjoying the beautiful view. Oh, there we go. It's not going to be very hot today at all. It must have rained. The humidity is quite high though, so I don't think that that's going to be very pleasant. And there's lots of birds that were sitting on that tree, but as you know, this camera has got a mind of its own, so it just does some crazy things. And it looks like a pair of ringneck doves, a male on the left, bobbing up and down, trying to get the attention of the female. No success. She was not having any of it. She was not interested in his dance moves. I don't blame him. They didn't look particularly great. There's also a little weaver that's just flown off. Oh, what's bounding on the right-hand side? Is it a go-away bird? Oh, there's a go-away bird in the tree. I'm hoping that there's just a delay on the camera and that we'll get to the bird eventually before it flies away. Sorry, everybody. Just a quick update. If this is your first time watching, I promise it's not me controlling the cameras. They are not easy to control, but I don't have access to them. And that squeak you can hear is just the camera moving from side to side. Sounds like it needs some 220. Okay, hopefully we're eventually going to get to this go-away bird. It's been the most obliging individual sitting perched up right at the top of the tree. doing a bit of feather maintenance, as we know all birds love to do and need to do, especially if it did get wet last night. It's going to need to dry off, although just by shaking your feathers you'll get a lot of the water off. But sitting up on the top of the tree is going to be the best place to be to dry them up. You probably need to just find focus. It looks like the focus is on the mountain at the background, so I'm just waiting for that to change so we can actually see the bird. Ah, there we go. That's way better. Now we can actually see it. Amazing. Sorry, everybody. I'm not sure why I'm having to point the small things out to make the small adjustments, but anyways, perhaps the team in Johannesburg needs a second cup of coffee. But it does look a little bit on the sad side now. This go-away bird. Are you wet? Are you damp? You're not living a great life at the moment. I even noticed this morning, though, just typically when we get lots of rain, everything kind of starts their day a bit later. It was so strange. I woke up, I don't even know what the time was. It must have been just after 5 a.m. That's typically my internal clock, and then I normally get up and open windows, open the sliding door, then Taco can go out to come in and out as he pleases. And it was so dark and gloomy still, and there was not one bird making any sounds. And then, of course, there was thunder rumbling in the distance. And then eventually, the birds have started chirping after the first sound. Whoops! Just defecated, so we know it's eating well. And when they do that, quite often it means that they're going to then take off and find another perch, but maybe not. Maybe just, needed to go. And also chosen the smallest, tiniest little branch to hold on to. Okay, I'm just hopping onto YouTube. I see there's lots and lots of questions and things coming on there, so I'm going to just read through them. I see Justin Wright, you've asked me if I figured out a way to deter or repel the monitor lizard. So for those of you that don't know what a monitor lizard is, maybe we'll see one, because we do get to see both rock and water monitors, which are the biggest lizard species that we can see in South Africa. And there must have been a nest. Some eggs have hatched, and now I've got all these young rock monitors, but they're big. They're like over 30 centimeters in length already once they've just hatched. And I've had to remove 3 from the house so far, 2 in one day. That's my record. There's no real way to deter them. There's nothing. People talk about snake repellent and all sorts of things like that, and it's complete hogwash. It's really not true at all. Just creeping inside a house is they're obviously finding it to be quite comfortable and safe. I also have a thatched roof, though, where there are lots of scorpions and beetles and all sorts of things living in it that I can't even see. So not only is it warm, but there's quite a bit of food for them. So I'm just glad I've managed to keep the birds outside. Not that I've ever had like a go-away bird coming on inside my house, but the hornbills are quite cheeky and they've been lingering around. And so I've just got to keep an eye on them, because trying to get them out of the house is a nightmare. Okay, perfect. I was just waiting for the go away bird to fly away. Let's see what else is here. What do we have at the Waterhole? Watch now. There are going to be 40 elephants, pride of lions. And that's always the case when you've zoomed in really close. And then all of a sudden you come back out and you're like, look, a whole host of wildlife. Not quite a whole host of wildlife, but definitely nice to still have some elephants. There's 2 bulls. Doesn't look like any ellies in the tree line making their way down. There's actually not much at all. I haven't even seen one wildebeest, but we're going to do a quick scan all the way around. Look how lovely and lush it is. The grass is really starting to pop up. Those are chalets, a part of the lodge, and maybe one day we'll get to see a leopard sitting in the fork of this fig tree. Wouldn't that be great?
Do you yearn for a seamless and tranquil connection to nature? Download the WildEarth app and become an explorer to enjoy ad-free viewing. Stay tuned into your favorite shows and enjoy the sights and sounds of nature uninterrupted. Explorer subscriptions are available monthly, biannually, and yearly. Sign up today. WildEarth, connecting with nature.
This is a fantastic question from Spidey. You've said, is there a limit to how many cavities a tree can host? Can it break down over time to, due to the cavities? So it can. So there's some. There's a couple of ways to answer this. Firstly, there are no limits to how many cavities a tree could have potentially, because remember, we don't quite know how big all the cavities are. Some are going to be much larger than others, and there are also some trees that have got really tough bark and that are insect resistant, so they can be quite tricky to even get into. So it's going to require a lot of work to create cavities in those trees. But then there are also other trees that have got a much softer, I suppose, inner bark, and well, not such a thick layer of outer bark, and then the inner bark is easier to penetrate, and then those trees are definitely going to be more vulnerable and they have more cavities in it. But if we look at this fig tree now, look at how many little crevices there are here. They're not necessarily cavities, but because of how the roots and the tree has actually grown, it's just naturally formed some cavities. So these weren't made by anything. And a lot of the creatures that do live in crevices, cavities, holes are quite small. I mean, if you've even seen something like a squirrel, let's just talk about mammal species that might live in cavities within trees. They're able to squeeze in teeny tiny spaces, and in fact, they don't want to have a live in a hole that's got a huge entrance to it either. But you're quite right. So trees quite often fall over, branches break because termites have been able to penetrate the outer bark, whether it was because elephants had scored the bark and pulled off of that outer bark and then exposed the inner bark. And then they'll start hollowing it out over time. But it would take a really, really long time for something like that to happen, for a tree to kind of fall over. But I would love to know. I couldn't even take a guess as to how many things are, say, just living within this fig tree, the amount of insects. I mean, there's going to be some kind of arachnids, scorpions of all sorts. I mean, other night I was out and about and we're using a scorpion torch. It's amazing. Also, a lot of the UV lights now um, have got a fair amount of distance to them, which is great. So you don't have to just be within a meter for the light to be able to work. And I was shocked as to how many scorpions we found in one night. And the most we saw in one tree in different cavities was 5, which was crazy. So that's just scorpions, right? Then you've got ants and all sorts of other creepy crawlies that we aren't able to see, and then birds, and of course some mammal species, squirrels being the main mammal species that we're going to see living within in a tree. Of course, you get monkeys and baboons that spend a lot of time up in trees, and yes, they will sleep up in them, but they're not going into necessarily any kind of cavities. So this tree here is going to provide, or any tree is going to provide, so much life. And we do this thing as humans, but because we can't see it, it means that maybe there's nothing there. But it's just, you need to really take a closer look. Oh, okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to say goodbye to Jamala for a bit, and we're going to head over to Juma, sorry, where we're going to do a bit more birding. Oh, yay! Look at what we've got: southern gray-headed sparrows, which are a common bird in this area. We see them all the time. Sometimes you see them in pairs, sometimes you'll see them on their own, but more commonly than not, you see them in groups, all flying together, feeding with one another, but just doing what pretty much the same thing as the go-away was doing, perched up right at the top of the tree, hoping that the sun will poke through to help warm them up, start drying their feathers. But otherwise, yeah, also looking around. Sitting on a different tree, though, one that's got quite a few thorns and spines in them. And when you're a small bird like this, you're quite vulnerable and exposed out in the open. Um, so they're not going to spend too much time up here. Otherwise, could potentially find themselves in a spot of trouble. But it's nice that we have them for a moment. But a very different beak to what the go-away bird had. These bills of the sparrows are sort of shorter, more conical shaped. They are predominantly seed eaters, but they will eat insects. I've seen them eating termites before, and I always say this: quite often seed eaters will supplement their diets with insects of some kind. I mean, a lot of frugivores, so birds that are just eating fruit, will do the same thing. So just because we say, for example, it's a frugivore, yes, that's the bulk of its diet, and if there is mainly fruit available, that's their preferred choice. But as you all know, there's not fruiting trees all year round, and typically the trees don't produce that much fruit in comparison for how many animal species are out there eating, say, just off of one tree. So they have to vary their diet somehow. I saw a really cool post on social media from a viewer of WildEarth, and she took a photo of a yellow-billed kite that was eating a bat, which was awesome. And yellow-billed kites are diurnal. They are birds of prey that fly around during the day. So for one of those kites to have found a bat, maybe it was roosting in a tree and happened to catch it, or maybe the bird landed in a tree and it was disturbed, or whatever the case may be. But there it was, broad daylight eating a bat. It just goes to show that nothing is really off the menu for animals. They'll just eat whatever they can, if their digestive system allows it, of course. Now, Catherine, you've asked if there are birds that prefer to nest in specific trees. Absolutely, they have their favorites. So let's talk about vultures for a second. And we look at white-backed vultures, which is birds that we could potentially see today because it's been so miserable and rainy and overcast. A lot of the big birds of prey and vultures are going to be, just roosting, settling down. There's no point. There's not going to be very many thermals, hot winds for them to catch. That broken branch, there is a starling nest in there. And so they love to nest up on top of knobthorn trees, just like this, or marula trees. And where, there's a decent, or even a couple of right at the top of jackleberries, which we've seen quite often too. But there needs to kind of be a flat, well, not quite flat, but a decent canopy on top with branches that's going to be able to sustain the weight of those birds. And then you look at another vulture species. Oh my goodness, what is wrong with my brain? White-backed vultures, and then hooded vultures. And they like to nest in jackleberries, for an example, but inside the tree rather than on top. They're a much smaller species. So it's crazy. Two birds from the same family using slightly different trees. And Cape vultures like to nest on cliff faces. Barbets and woodpeckers, they'll nest in any trees that they're able to create a cavity in. They don't necessarily have a preferred favorite. And just hear the starlings are unhappy about something, but they might just be shouting at one another. You hear that raspy call, rah, rah. If you hear lots of birds making those kinds of sounds, go and investigate. Go and check out what it is. It could be something like a snake or an owl or a mongoose. But that might, yeah, that's a tricky one to say. But starlings don't normally shout for lots of things. But snakes, definitely. And owls, absolutely.
2024 is here, and it's sure to be our best year yet. Come along and join us on the 21st of January for a company update town hall that's open to all registered viewers. We will update our viewers on where we are, discuss what's to come in the new year, and answer any questions. Watch it live on the WildEarth app. WildEarth, connecting with nature.
and this is a woodland kingfisher, in case you're wondering. A lot of people say woodlands with an S at the end, but it's not. It's woodland kingfisher, and then many of them would be woodland kingfishers, just in case you were wondering. We're trying to correct the world. We've all been guilty of it at some point or another in our life. But it's just sitting here, patiently waiting for something to catch its attention so it can swoop down and eat it. And this is another great example of a bird that has a beak that looks like it should eat one specific food type. And as its name suggests, right, it should be fish. But I just find it so fascinating how beaks are adaptable, because when you look at this beak and everything that you read about birds that eat insects, they don't typically have long beaks like this. But here we are, masters at catching insects of all sorts, and there's no shortage of them at the moment. So these birds will be well fed. One of the intra-African migrants, they just come down for the summer, and then they move further north in Africa. And then, Marissa, you've said that you were watching bats on the Jumacam last night, and you thought it would make for an interesting discussion. Gosh, and you've said, what are the common myths versus facts about bats? I mean, well, should we start with the ones that my mom told me? Thanks, Bossy Donna. I'm terrified of bats for a very, very, very long time. I think all the way through primary school, I was terrified of them too, because naturally it was really difficult to get me to come inside. I was always outside playing around, even till after dark. Although I didn't grow up, on a game reserve or anything like that. So it's not like we had to worry about dangerous animals. And I was very, very lucky. We had big gardens and small holdings and things. So it was fairly safe to be playing around at night. But I'm pretty sure my mom used to tell me this to get me inside. She said that the bats are going to swoop down and they're going to get stuck in my hair. Now, my mom would brush my hair when I was younger, probably because I just refused to brush it, like any young girl with long hair. And mine is notoriously thick. It's horrible. And I was traumatized at the fact that if I'm going to get a bat in there, either my mom's going to cut the bat out of my hair, or she's going to try and brush it. And some days when I wriggled around too much, I felt the brush on the back of my head, if you know what I'm saying. And I didn't really appreciate that. And I thought I'd probably be wriggling around quite a bit if there was a bat in there. So, anyways, I would come inside. So they don't get stuck in your hair. I'm sure there must be someone that had a bat fly and get trapped into their hair at some point. I think it's highly unlikely that something like that would happen, but there's definitely a possibility. I mean, I've ducked and dived a few times as they swooped down. What else? That bats are vampires, I suppose, right? Isn't that a funny one? And in fact, most bat species don't even feast on blood at all, right? They're masters at catching flying insects, and I love bats now because they are largely responsible for controlling the mosquito population. And it is said that one bat in an evening can eat over 100,000 mosquitoes. Isn't that crazy? Doesn't that also terrify you as to how many mosquitoes are actually out there flying around if that's just one bat? Um, so yeah, so I love having them around. They're always interesting. Not a fan though when bats start to come inside. So that's where I have to be careful, because thatched roofs make for great roosting spots. Um, Obviously, bat scat feces can be toxic, so keep an eye out for that. You don't want to be inhaling too much of bat feces. Really, that's not good for you. You can get very sick. What else? What are the myths that are there? Actually, I actually can't think of any other myths of bats, to be quite honest. And I think it's because, well, we just don't get to see them very often. But I've seen some amazing footage coming from the AfriCam cameras of bats, especially at the Shalati Bridge, which is in the Kruger National Park. There had some amazing sightings looking at those cameras at the bats at night. It's hysterical watching them compete with one another, I suppose, over roosting space, uh, trying to, I suppose, entice, a female to mate. It's all rather comical behaviors that I've never seen before. Marissa, you and I just quickly carrying on with the back conversation. You asked, where do bats typically roost? In a nice, dark, safe place. So a tree with a lot of foliage would be a good place. A roof, for an example, that sort of extends past the wall. So that would make a good place to roost underneath a bridge. Lots of different places. Some bats actually curl up into leaves. You have no idea the different bat species all over the world. They've all got their specific places and I suppose favorite places to kind of roost. But the main thing is that because the bats are nocturnal, well, they come out once the sun is set in the last light. That's when you see bats sort of being most active. That crepuscular period, the last of the light. They need to sleep for most of the day. They'll be incredibly vulnerable. If they were flying around during the day, there'd be a lot of birds of prey that would snatch them up. That's for sure. So there's also a lot of competition of birds already. I'm just talking about birds now that would be feasting, in the sky and catching all the flying insects during the day. Even insects, look at dragonflies for an example. They do the same thing as what bats do, but during the day. So it's actually clever that they are feeding at nighttime, flying around, because if you think about it, there's not that much other than insects flying about at night. There's a couple of nocturnal bird species, and then, of course, bats are not birds, they're mammals flying about. It would be a bit easier for them to be able to do it. Maybe less chance of being predated on and more food availability. And then, Sasha, I think you're talking about the kingfisher. You asked, is it normal for a small bird to be perched for that long? Yes, when you are, say, something like a kingfisher, for an example, and then not all kingfishers, but a lot of the species will sit on a perch and wait and sit and look for movement, whether it's them catching a fish or, in the case of the woodland kingfisher, catching an insect. So they aren't flying and catching insects on the wing. So while they're flying around, essentially, they use a very different method. They'll wait and wait and wait, see something move, fly down, hopefully grab it, and then come back to their perch and feast on it. So you get something called hawking and you get something called sallying. So birds that hawk, this is just talking about different feeding techniques of birds. Think of something like a nightjar. It's a nocturnal bird species. They sit down on the ground out in the open. They wait for an insect to fly above them. They swoop up. They eat it while they're still in the air, and then they land again. Whereas a kingfisher or a fork-tailed drongo, they'll sit and wait. They fly down, catch something, then bring their prey back to a perch, and then they eat it. That's called sallying, not hawking. Hawking basically describes the practice of a bird catching something in the air and then eating it in the air, or normally like from a static position, flying up and then eating it before they land again. So it is quite normal. But again, it's difficult. If you're sitting out in the open, you're exposed. The Egyptian geese, though, they don't care too much. They're like the watchdogs of the water holes. They could also be pond keepers, pond protectors, maybe. There's a male and a female just kind of marching along. And they are so vigilant. They're watching what's going on around them. You hear that rasping? There's something. There has to be a snake or an owl or a monitor lizard raiding a nest. You can just hear how angry some of those birds are now, smaller birds. Oh my goodness. Those are common miners. Why are you here? I don't know. Let's see what's happening. What is that in the grass in front of the geese? Is it a monitor lizard? I think it is. So, just really interesting what I was saying about the miners is I haven't actually seen much of them in the Sabi Sand, but they are starting to encroach into these areas. This is not a native bird to South Africa. They were introduced a very long time ago. I suppose I think they're naturalized now. They're just everywhere, all over cities, but are now pushing into these wild spaces as the populations grow. But there's definitely a monitor lizard behind those geese, and I think that's maybe what was upsetting some of the birds.
Nurture your connection with nature with our weekly newsletter. Become an explorer and receive the latest word from the wild in your inbox. Catch up with your favorite WildEarth characters. Watch the week's memorable wildlife encounters. Stay up to date with the happenings and what to expect from WildEarth. Sign up today and get the best seats on the largest safari vehicle in the world. WildEarth, connecting with nature.
So that makes so much sense as to why the Egyptian geese were marching on over. They were responding to the birds that were alarming at the water monitor that's underneath those logs. I don't know what it's doing specifically, the Egyptian geese decided that it wasn't up to no good. It was just living its normal life. And there are plenty of these monitor lizards around this area. The only time that the Egyptian geese might show any interest in sort of a negative fashion towards the monitor lizard, if it was raiding their nest or trying to eat one of their goslings or something along those lines. Otherwise, animals coexist with one another perfectly, even predators and prey. Oh no. I just thought someone was knocking on my window, and as I turned and looked, there was a yellow-billed hornbill that was pecking at it, sitting on the windowsill. Thankfully, it's just flown away because I was about to go close the side of the house's windows. Otherwise, I have to get the Rice Krispies out to lure them outside. I'm just joking. Please don't feed the animals, especially not Rice Krispies, which is a cereal. But the little trick I use so that I don't have to fight the hornbills, I just leave a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will. Oh, I've got mealworms. I've got dried mealworms. I don't have to use Rice Krispies anymore. I can lure them out with those. They'd probably prefer that. So it looks like a decent sized monitor lizard. We typically see them sunbathing on the logs that are close to the dam wall, but sadly we aren't able to see that with there not being much sun out. And I doubt that the ground or the logs are retaining as much heat as they normally do when they've received a bit of the morning light, or it's just sort of sitting and watching, surveying, monitoring, if you will. We had a great sighting. When was it? Was it Monday? It must have been Monday. Of a monitor lizard, a rock monitor though, different species, at Rosie's Pan. It was so close, climbing up a broken log. So that was really awesome to see. It was the best monitor sighting that I've had so far on Live at the Waterhole. This monitor lizard seems so suspicious, the way that it's kind of just looking. Maybe the birds did upset it a bit. I doubt that there's anything there that it's feeding on. Are you going to come towards the water? Please do. So wonderful watching them swim. They're graceful creatures when they're in the water. You can just see it breathing quite quickly. Or breathing, and then almost looks like it holds its breath. We had a brief sighting on Monday as well of a martial eagle at Gari Dam, and this would be an amazing moment if a martial eagle was around. And this is what they look for. There we go. Did you see that miner? That common miner, or Indian miner is another name for it. Try and mob it, almost tried and bopped it on the head. Perhaps there's something that we don't know, that we didn't see. Maybe these miners are nesting around here in a cavity, and it could be a tree that's quite low down on the ground, or a tree that has fallen over. Maybe it was trying to raid their nest, and these birds are just upset with it. Because we heard shouting, for quite some time, and I mentioned it earlier on, and I said, I don't know where it's coming from, but perhaps it was them the entire time. And it's crazy just how long, for example, a pair of birds will stay harassing a potential predator. And if they have raided the nest or something along those lines, they spend even longer. And when I was in Kenya, I was training guides in Kenya at a beautiful lodge called Ishara. And we were driving, and we heard these birds alarming. So I said, let's go and figure out what it was. And we found this one little bush, and I was like, well, it must be coming from in there. So we had a look, and it was a boomslang that had caught a superb starling, and it was trying to eat it, but it was too big. And there were two other superb starlings that were constantly just bashing it on top of the head and on the tail. And eventually the boomslang let go. The bird was already dead. And then moved off. And it was crazy to see because there was no trees nearby to that tree. It was one small shrub. And because it was being harassed so much, it had to venture down the tree and out and into the open on the grass and literally moved. It was the quickest I've ever seen a boomslang move in my entire life. We obviously kept a nice distance. We didn't want to disturb anything. And it zoomed just through the grass a couple of 100 meters. We could just see it just kept going, 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 going. And so it was sort of making its way in the direction of another clump of trees and bushes. It was amazing to see, though. And Larry Kirkbride, you've asked if the woodland kingfisher breeds down south or down or up in the north. Not down in the north, up in the north. So they do breed here in South Africa, but a lot of birds that are migratory don't always come for breeding season. It might just purely be for a new availability of food. I mean, you think about it, some birds, especially that are Palearctic migrants, so they're traveling, you know, far and wide from the African continent, and because the winters then will be so harsh, wherever they might be permanently living, it's better to come down where it's warmer and that there's more food available. But again, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that they breed here. And actually, sorry, I did see Gertie, you mentioned that at Lake Panic, which is in the Kruger National Park, you watched a woodland kingfisher presenting a hatchling to its mate. How crazy is that? So that would have been, again, just going back to the topic of, birds and their beaks and what they mean in terms of what food do they feast on. That woodland kingfisher probably just saw an opportunity and took it and grabbed a little hatchling and said, "Here's a lovely gift for you." But finding the monitor is on the move and just sort of sat frozen for a long time. There was a lot of attention that was drawn to it just by the birds vocalizing, the constant, obviously Egyptian geese going over, and then the common miners hanging about. So it is better that they sort of do perform that freeze technique and just wait it out. Animals are so patient.
When we started our donation drive on the 28th of December, we'd hoped to raise $15,000 for critically needed technical equipment. Your generosity has seen us raise more than $50,000 from 400 amazing supporters. Needless to say, we're overwhelmed and massively grateful. Two incredible viewers, GC and Bramble1, donated $5,000 and $15,000 respectively. Our profound thanks to each and every one of you.
Now, it seems like these Egyptian geese haven't been very successful this year. We've yet to see any goslings making it to adulthood. Well, at least at Gowrie Dam. And it's a pity because it's big enough. It's not too chaotic with elephants. And there's great nesting sites available for them and good grazing. But as you know, at 1 o'clock, which is going to, well, it's going to turn 1 o'clock just now, we introduced the AfriCam cameras, which I'm quite excited about, and that brings about a whole host of other opportunities to see wildlife.